As one cabinet minister told me coming out of the PLP last night, he said, this has killed any talk of a leadership challenge. He says he's killed it stone dead. Now, I think it's killed it for now. I don't think it's killed it stone dead, but certainly they do feel quite confident that for now there's not going to be any putsch.
Keir Starmer told his MPs he'd won every fight he'd ever been in and wasn't going to walk away from being Prime Minister. They cheered him rapturously at a meeting in Westminster, but did they do that because they believe in him or for the benefit of those reporters listening outside? Well, one of those reporters was, of course, Times Radio's political editor, Anna Mikhailova, who joins us now. Morning, Anna.
Good morning, Stig.
So, Keir Starmer survived yesterday. I guess the question is, do you believe some of the reports coming out of the PLP that not only he survived, he's ready to thrive?
Well, look, he's definitely survived. I think we can safely say he's survived until recess next week when it starts and the by-election after that. I think the by-election has been crucial here because it really caused a wobble among some of those who are unhappy with the Prime Minister. And I think, you know, what we saw yesterday was cabinet ministers looked over the precipice and decided that they didn't quite want to do anything, which certainly helped him survive now, but it also goes to the biggest point he's got going for him at the moment, which is there isn't an obvious solution to when, you know, the unhappiness about Keir Starmer's leadership. There isn't an obvious contender that's ready or that people can actually say will turn things around in the polls for them. So I think that's what helped. Also, it's worth pointing out that Downing Street yesterday, between the hours of 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, did manage to buckle down with crisis talks in the cabinet room and actually managed to get every single cabinet minister and key Labour figures like Angela Rayner to publicly state their allegiance. And I spoke to someone last night who's a very seasoned Westminster operator who did say, I didn't think they had it in them. So they've managed to get that pledge. And what that does, just to be clear, it didn't just help Keir Starmer survive the afternoon and the evening. It also makes it very, very hard for any of those cabinet ministers, and I think we know which ones we're speaking about specifically, to make any kind of move in the near future. So at least until the by-election, we're pretty sure that he's safe.
Does the person you're thinking of as a cabinet minister's name rhyme with Les Wheating?
It may do, but you know there are others as well. People talk about just yesterday we were all talking about Shabana Mahmood as a possible contender. Who's just playing a very clever game. All of that speculation for now will go. There's obviously a lot of talk about streeting separately, but as one cabinet minister told me coming out of the PLP last night, he said, this has killed any talk of a leadership challenge. He says he's killed it stone dead. Now, I think it's killed it for now. I don't think it's killed it stone dead, but certainly they do feel quite confident that for now there's not going to be any putsch. That doesn't mean, by the way, that Keir Starmer is going to be any better at weathering crises or he's going to be able to pass legislation that he wants through the Commons.
Yeah.
I think we've seen even more of a concession publicly to his backbenchers, although that dynamic remains very difficult because Keir Starmer yesterday said, and Lucy Powell made a point of saying that he needs to engage more with his MPs and be in listening mode more. And you've had some MPs hear what they want to hear from that. So some think that means Downing Street is now going to involve them a lot more in legislation and how things are managed. But the reality is, we had a PLP where the Prime Minister came in with almost his entire cabinet who had just in the hour before pledged allegiance, very obviously. And it was a meeting where any MP who felt critical didn't really feel like they could speak up.
Yeah. It's an interesting point, that and we're going to talk later on in the programme about actually Keir Starmer might survive until May, but what work will actually be done in the business of government? What can actually be done if he's constantly having to be nodding to his backbenchers? It does seem to disrupt his legislative agenda. We'll get into that later on. What was Anna Mikhailova up to then yesterday? Because I mentioned the Les Wheating, because this is a briefing that came out yesterday. Everyone from the PM down to the most junior bag carrier knows who was behind the McChicken coup. That's the Anna Mikhailova move. And his name rhymes with Les Wheating. So the argument here is that Anna Mikhailova decided to go over the top, and he thought that when he turned round, there'd be some reinforcements following him.
Look, I think there are two schools of thought emerging on this. One is that, as you say, there was a coordinated effort planned with Anna Sarwar, because it would have been pretty odd, these people say, for Sarwar to go over the top without anyone to follow. There was certainly speculation in the run-up that that would happen. And Wes Streeting has been the obvious person in the firing line. Streeting and his allies completely deny that, and they effectively say that if he had planned something, they would have actually executed it better. But the analogy has been drawn very publicly with James Purnell and the failed coup under Gordon Brown, which did see Gordon Brown continue on to an election. Now, the counter-argument to that is, and this is what people who are around Streeting privately say, they think he's being set up. They think that Downing Street used the opportunity to, as well as shore up Keir Starmer's support, effectively brief against Wes Streeting once again, and they're trying to hurt his chances. And it's very difficult to see who's telling the truth, frankly, in this kind of situation, because like you have in any run-up to a leadership contest or leadership contest, all the rival camps start briefing against each other. And all the rival camps are out to get each other. So it's never quite clear, especially when making the first move is such a politically toxic thing to do, you could say. It's always interesting to see where those reports are coming from about someone leading the charge, because they could easily come from a rival camp who just want that other person to be seen leading the charge.
So this is the whole false flag argument that, and this was used about Angela Rayner, that Angela Rayner had a leadership website appear and then disappear, and her allies are busy saying, oh, someone else created that to make it look like Angela Rayner was doing it. It's so mad, this, isn't it, Anna?
Yeah, and you never quite know. Like with the website, for example, it could be one of many things. It could be someone in her camp who's been overexcited and just done it, or it could be very much a rival who has done it on purpose to, in the crucial moment, point reporters to that website and say, oh, look what was going on. We had very similar things going on with Kemi Badenoch while she was in government, with lots of people trying to point out that she was constantly on manoeuvres, and her camp spent most of their time trying to tell us that we're not. Yeah. And we don't really know what the truth is, because if you're a politician and you see, if you're a senior politician who has a chance at the leadership, it would almost be irresponsible not to have anything not to get ready when you see a government struggling to the extent that Keir Starmer struggling.
That's a very fair point. We mentioned that earlier on in the programme. Just before you go, another thing. So he lost Morgan McSweeney. He lost Tim Allen. There's reporting in the Times today that Chris Wormold might be going. And he's not a. I mean, none of them are necessarily household names. But who is he, and what does that mean? Is this cleaning house or a sign that people are just, there's sort of chaos within Number 10?
Chris Wormold is the cabinet secretary. He is the most senior civil servant, and I think I don't think this will be seen as chaos. Obviously, senior people leaving is never a great thing because it involves quite a lot of change. But I think this is specifically the kind of change that some of Keir Starmer's detractors want. And also, we do know that since Starmer appointed Chris Wormold, almost from the get-go, there was criticism of Wormold from within the heart of Downing Street, and also from other parts of government, other ministers' teams. So you've had Wormold as a bit of a lightning rod for criticism about delivery. I think the bigger point here is Keir Starmer has done the big move. He has now cleared house with Morgan McSweeney is the most important one, but also his Director of Communications yesterday, and Chris Wormold, the Cabinet Secretary. If things now don't turn around, and if Keir Starmer now doesn't get better at tackling the next crisis, whatever that may be, we've got ones coming down the road, but we also could have something unpredictable. Then what is his next move? How can he reset when things don't work out next time?
It's a great point, that. Anna, good to speak to you. You're going to keep on top of all this stuff, I know. Thanks for joining us. That's Anna Mikhailova there, Times Radio's political editor. The thing that occurred to me listening to that, Kate, is it's so exhausting. And it's going to speak to a point we're about to get to later on in our programme. But is anyone actually doing any governing? Or are they just creating fake websites for their rivals and making up briefings against each other and jockeying for position and going and applauding the Prime Minister at a confected meeting for the benefit of journalists. Is anyone actually just sitting around and going, maybe we should do a little bit of light government at some stage this week?
Well, we're going to speak to Ben Clatworthy about what might fall by the wayside when it comes to government policy over the next couple of weeks, because as Anna says, the Prime Minister is safe for now, but for how long? I think one of the things that, for example, losing staff in Downing Street points to is there is now going to be a bit of a struggle to replace them. One of the things I found really interesting in the papers today is that there is a suggestion that Keir Starmer wanted to appoint Louise Casey into his Chief of Staff role, and the reporting is that she didn't want the job. Now, on a number of levels, that's a very strange choice because she is responsible for some of the really big reset moments that the Prime Minister has already pointed to. She's guiding some of the huge changes his government wants to make, including on social care, for example, and care more generally. She's got a role in talking about the rape gangs inquiry. She's going to advise on that. She's so key to those things. To think you could move her away from them shows, again, this tension between the idea that you need to make policy, you need to show change, but you're also trying to run a political operation that's clearly failing.